Wonder Woman is iconic. She is possibly the most iconic female character in fiction. She's a symbol of peace, truth, and compassion. She's an icon for feminism and progress. In short, she's awesome. But she's been underrepresented in media for a long time. She was in the DCAU, but that version of her was not great. She had a pilot that didn't go anywhere, DC Superhero Girls, and 2 animated movies in Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman Bloodlines, some appearances in other media like Injustice, the movie and the games, Justice League animated movies, and Fortnite. But when you compare this to the media involving Batman or Superman, it pales in comparison. That brings us to live action. Wonder Woman appeared for the first time in Batman v Superman and got her own solo movie the year after, in 2017, directed by Patty Jenkins. The sequel, released in 2020, also happened. Before we continue into the movies themselves, I want to take a moment to talk about Diana as a character. As mentioned previously, there's a few things that she represents: peace, truth, compassion, feminism, and progress. I barely see these things in the DCEU's version of the character. Leaving aside for a moment that the actress stands for the opposite of peace, truth, compassion, and progress as she supports the ongoing genocide in Palestine, the character doesn't have many moments with these qualities being shown. In the first film, this is done pretty well. She advocates for peace, which is what the film is about. While I think that movie is her best appearance in the DCEU by a country mile, its effectiveness is somewhat limited by a number of factors. The big one for me is that this film is the character's first interaction with man's world. The fish out of water shtick, although relevant to the story, makes her reaction to the lack of peace, truth, compassion, and gender equality come off more as an impulsive reaction rather than a hard stance. An impulsive reaction makes sense when you're thrown out of your element, especially in a war zone, but that's not where the trouble comes in for me. It lies more in her later appearances. In Batman v Superman, Justice League, Wonder Woman 1984, and her other small appearances, she doesn't have these qualities. Her advocacy is dialed down a lot or completely absent. There are moments of her being compassionate, think the mall scene from Wonder Woman 1984 where she smiles at a kid, but overall that's very little. When your character is only reacting the way she should to something happening firsthand right in front of her, well, firstly that's a pretty bad handling of the concept of compassion. You have to put her in situations where she reacts that way all the time, and they do. She saves Barbara from some creep in Wonder Woman 1984. She's faced with violence and lies constantly throughout BVS and Justice League. Stuff like that happens around her all the time, but she doesn't react the same way at all. It undermines her character when she doesn't seem to care about the things that are fundamental to the character. Wonder Woman was pretty good. The third act really pulls its legs out from under it, but other than that I'd say it's a good film. I don't have much to criticize about the movie. Instead, I'm going to use this segment of the video to talk to you about semiotics. Semiotics is the study of signs and symbols and their use or interpretation. In semiotics, we talk about the signifier and the signified. The signifier is anything we use to refer to the signified. For example, the like button is a signifier and signifies the concept of a like, the same way the YouTube symbol on your phone refers to the signified YouTube as a concept or website. Basically, the signifier is a way of referring to a concept, and the signified is the concept we are referring to. The word rose is technically a signifier of the concept of a rose. Language can be a signifier. Additionally, a rose can be a signifier for love. The word rose in a book or movie can even be a signifier for love. But okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Things won't get that complicated. There are 3 types of signifiers. Icons are signifiers that resemble the signified. Examples of icons are everywhere. Statues, paintings, and drawings tend to fall into the category of icons, as they usually resemble the signified. Symbols are arbitrary cultural codings. Most logos, for example, are symbols. The apps on your phone tend to be symbols. Even though we refer to them as icons, that's technically not correct from a semiotics perspective. There's plenty of examples of other symbols, like the recycling symbol. Finally, indexes are signifiers that are caused by the signified. Footprints signify someone walking. Lipstick stains signify a kiss. Here, again, there's plenty of nuance, like the way the phone icon on a mobile phone is derived from analog telephones, and were therefore icons, but are now closer to symbols because phones that have that signifier on it tend to be rectangles and not have that shape anymore. This, again, is further than we'll get in terms of this film, so it's more food for thought than anything else. Now, we'll take a look at a few examples from the movie. On Themyscira, we're told about the God Killer, a mythical sword capable of ending the life of a god. Diana takes it with her when she leaves her man's world, and it stays with her until her encounter with Ares, where he destroys the sword with ease. It turns out that Diana is the God Killer. We can then say that the sword is a signifier for Diana herself, since both are referred to as the God Killer. In this scene, Diana disregards her secret identity to defend herself and Steve Trevor from a group of Germans. When she pushes one of them away, he steps on the fake glasses that had fallen off of Diana's face shortly beforehand. The fake glasses have long been a staple of the superhero genre, using them to disguise a secret identity, most iconically with Superman and Spider-Man. Someone stepping on the glasses here is a refutation of the secret identity. Throughout the sequence in London, Diana is constantly disinterested in fitting in with man's world. The stepping on the glasses symbolizes her definitively stepping away from a secret identity to prioritize defeating the enemy, which is what caused the glasses to be destroyed. Diana liberates a village occupied by German soldiers. While fighting off the soldiers, she breaks a gun behind her back. Guns have been used to symbolize a lot of different things in various media. Two of the biggest, however, are death and violence. In this case, her destroying the gun can be interpreted in a number of different ways. The first is a message of peace. Destroying a weapon so closely related to death and violence is fairly clear anti-violence symbolism. The second is related to what she is literally doing in the sequence. Namely, she is liberating a town. Destroying a weapon used to oppress while fighting off the oppressors is a nice accent to the action. Finally, destroying a symbol of war is clear anti-war sentiment. A lot of this film is anti-war. Diana's bewilderment at the sight of the suffering caused by the conflict is the crux of that. The film fumbles this messaging a fair bit, but throughout the second act, this plays a big role. Wonder Woman would have been a great movie if it wasn't for the third act. I have to assume it's a product of studio interference, because let's be honest, it's not out of character for WB. And it strays from the concept set up throughout the first two acts so much it feels like it wasn't made by the same person. Diana's arc in this film is realizing that destruction isn't just the product of deities, but also humanity itself. I cannot, for the life of me, figure out what must go through your head to have that be so central to the film, and then make the third act about how Ares was interfering and Diana is only capable of killing him because she's the daughter of Zeus. That's the opposite of the message of the film. Furthermore, it fucks with every appearance chronologically set after this. This is to do with the framing surrounding Diana leaving Themyscira. She leaves to stop Ares. If she learns that humanity is responsible for its own troubles, it makes sense for her to stay. But, again, this lesson is greatly diminished by Ares being there in the first place. So she defeats Ares and just stays there for no apparent reason? If you want that third act conflict, you have Dr. Poison right there. Want something besides that? Put Phobos and Deimos in there. That's a nice parallel with the fight between Ares and all the other gods, having the daughter of Zeus fight the sons of Ares. Having her fight Ares here gives her no reason to stay in man's world. It also means that you have no base motivation in further appearances. She's just there for BVS, Justice League, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and The Flash. And she's not really doing anything in Wonder Woman 1984. It just doesn't make sense. I quite like the reveal that Ares is the British guy. It's always nice to acknowledge that both sides in a war are causing the destruction, especially with World War I. It tends to be portrayed from the British perspective, and it kind of seems like we just accept that the Germans were the bad guys because they were the bad guys in World War II, but that's not necessarily the case. What really pisses me off though is that she seemingly forgets this and joins the British celebrations. There's some very vivid propagandistic imagery here with people kissing wrapped in a Union Jack, and it's just not acknowledged. She's just walking around there, seemingly unbothered by the celebration of a country that was responsible for the death of millions under the leadership of Ares. Letting go of that movie for a second, I want to talk about something more general for both of the films that I find very weird. That's Steve Trevor. Obviously, it's very weird and unnecessary to bring him back for the sequel, especially considering how they did it and what implications that creates given the nature of Diana's relationship with him and the fact that that wasn't his own body, but I want to leave that aside for a moment. Diana is a feminist icon. Hell, she's an honorary ambassador for the empowerment of women and girls with the UN. To take a character that iconically feminist and have her entire story revolve around a man is wild. Okay, sure, a man crash landing in Themyscira makes sense, and I can accept her staying with him throughout the war to protect him, but she's hung up on him for 100 years. Why? Why could Wonder Woman 1984 not just be about her relationship with Barbara and have thematic and narrative parallels with Steve Trevor? Why did he have to be there? What did he do in that story? I sure don't remember him doing anything. Okay, keep in mind, this was the first man she ever met, and she was obsessed with him for 100 years. Personally, I don't think that's a very good message. If it wasn't enough for Wonder Woman 1984 to be a bad movie, it also just does racism. Okay, maybe that's not a very charitable way to put it. There's a part of the film where Maxwell Lord, Diana, and Steve Trevor travel to the Middle East. The sequence plays into something called Orientalism. Orientalism is a theory in media and cultural studies originating from Palestinian philosopher Edward Said's book of the same name. It's quite a complex idea, but I'll try to synthesize it the best I can. Essentially, Orientalism is the imitation or depiction of aspects of the Eastern world by Western artists. The Orient, the East, is a product of the Occident, the West. The Occident incorrectly, or at least incompletely, depicts the East to create a caricatural view of them. You can imagine that, especially before the internet existed, this caused people to view people from the Orient in a very specific way. That is what Orientalism is. The stereotypes of the Eastern world in relation to the power dynamic between the Orient and the Occident. So, how does Wonder Woman 1984 communicate with Orientalism? It does so in 4 major ways. Firstly, its broad presentation of Egypt. We barely see any of the culture presented. It's only seen through the costuming, set dressing, and yellow filter that's on everything here for some reason. By not presenting any of the culture in a meaningful way, the Egyptians are reduced to tools for the Western characters to use and react to. This is an especially egregious example of this, as there is only one major Egyptian character, and that character is only there to be manipulated by a Western character, Maxwell Lord. He exploits Emir and attempts to take his oil, which Emir had already sold to Saudi Arabia. Instead, he takes his security detail. We're seeing, in real time, the West come into the East, being confronted with the fact it does not have what they seek, and taking more anyway. Practically an analogy for the relationship between the Orient and the Occident. Lord, of course, isn't the only Western character that enters the country. Diana and Steve are also there. So what are they doing? If you were thinking it was engaging with the people of Egypt at all, you'd be thinking wrong. They, like Lord, take what they need with minimal thought of what effect it might have on those they take it from, as seen when they leave a cab driver in the middle of the desert. This happens right before a fight between Diana and Lord. In this conflict, like the rest of the sequence in Egypt, the native inhabitants are treated as disposable, unimportant henchmen, and nothing more. An obstacle to be overcome, not people to connect with, both for the protagonist and the antagonist. Finally, let's talk a bit about the Dreamstone, the magical artifact at the center of this film. A part of Orientalism is the stereotyping of non-Western cultures as entrenched in mystery and mysticism, while the West is portrayed as concerned with science, democracy, and other such values. In other words, the presented difference between being civilized and uncivilized. This has a lot to do with the rampant Islamophobia at the time Said wrote the text. However, this isn't just unique to Islam or even to the Orient. The homogeneous presentations of non-Western locations is at the very core of Said's text. The issue isn't just about misrepresenting a single culture, it's about presenting a massive part of the world as all the same, or very similar, when the cultures across these countries are rich and varied. So what does this have to do with the Dreamstone? The Dreamstone in Wonder Woman 1984 is a magical artifact shrouded in mystery. It isn't from the traditional Orient, but rather from the Mayans, so Central America. Instead of observing it from afar and letting it remain part of the culture it was found in, the Americans took it for themselves. The whole "this thing belongs in a museum" sentiment, of course, is just a modernized abstract of colonialism. We take from other cultures and show it to the masses as some sort of artifact of otherness. In fact, Maxwell Lord doesn't just observe it, but merges himself with it, taking it in the most literal sense. This, again, reflects the relationship between the West and the East. This film is a prime example of what privilege does to an MF. Case in point, the climax. The whole climax is about everyone in the world getting one wish, one chance to get anything they want. The characters in this film wish for power or love. I'm sure this was supposed to reflect what others might choose, but it screams I don't know what I'm talking about. Imagine for a moment that you have stage 4 cancer and get the chance to wish that away. Or imagine you live in a war zone and you can wish away the conflict. Imagine your family was murdered and it could be like that never happened. Or maybe you wished for world peace or for erasing all hunger, dissipating global warming, or ending homelessness. Oh, but here comes Wonder Woman, saying that everyone has to give their wish back. And that's supposed to convince everyone in the world to renounce their wish? Have fun dying, I guess. I highly doubt that this was intentional, but that's kind of the issue. That not crossing your mind is a massive self-report. Imagine thinking, what might everyone in 1984 wish for, and not once think that someone might want anything more than what the characters in this film wish for. There's only one way to describe it: privilege. But even that pales in comparison to the worst thing in this film. I genuinely think this might be one of the most brazenly offensive and downright despicable things in any film I've ever seen. I don't think I can put this into words myself, so I'll just play the clip.
19 inches, no strings attached.
I'll stick to the one I don't have, but thank you.
Wonder Woman is pretty good. Like I said, I think this movie is really solid up until the third act. I also really don't like the Daughter of Zeus origin, as it undercuts the message. But there's a lot to love here. I think this one makes sense for a high B tier. Wonder Woman 1984, on the other hand, damn is it bad. For one, it absolutely wastes the title. How are you gonna have a character as political as Wonder Woman and slap the word 1984 next to her just to not do anything with it? And that's not even to speak of the contents. It is impressive how outwardly bad this movie is. The only real redeeming factor here is Pedro Pascal, who was absolutely cooking here. This film manages to be racist and glorify sexual assault. It reeks of privilege. That's not even mentioning the characters, visuals, and plot. I wasn't really planning on using the F tier. I feel like the general level of effort people put into a movie elevates anything from F tier. But this film is sufficiently bad, not just in lack of quality, but also in a sort of malice, that I'll make an exception. Wonder Woman 1984 is an F tier. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to smash like, comment. This is the third video in a series, so make sure to check out the other two. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video, which is about Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League. I'm gonna go renounce my wish for world peace. Sorry, couldn't be helped.